Welcome to Field Notes with Rob and Chris. I'm Rob Buccini.
And I'm Chris Buccini. Today, we're joined by two-term Delaware Governor, three-term State Treasurer, and a personal friend of ours, Jack Markell. Jack is a close advisor to President Biden and is the White House coordinator for Operation Allies Welcome, which helps Afghan refugees safely resettle in the United States.
Prior to politics, Jack had a very successful career in the private sector, leading the wireless technology revolution. One of the companies that he led was Nextel, a company that has grown into a very large wireless company now. Quite literally, a jack of all trades. We're honored that you're here with us today. Governor, thank you so much for taking the time.
Well, great to be with both of you, especially in this phenomenal space that would not exist were it not for Buccini Poland. So,
and not for you. And at Field Notes, what we try to do is we try to go out into the field to parts of our city, parts of our community that are important to us. So thank you for being here in the Chemours World Headquarters lobby. And thanks to Chemours for letting us be here. But as many of you may know, Governor Markell is a proud native of Newark, Delaware. He went to Brown University and went on to get his MBA at University of Chicago. He is highly distinguished. He's a Henry Crown Fellow and is a Rodell Fellow at the Aspen Institute. He and his wife, Carla, reside here in Wilmington, Delaware, and they have two amazing children as well who they raised here. But Governor, we wanted to really just sort of start with your early career in technology. We all know that you were at Nextel. I think you were number 13. Okay, you're the 13th employee. 7th sounds just as good. But you were there early on, and you really were at the forefront of the cellular revolution. Can you tell us a little bit about those early days and how you got there?
Well, the main thing I learned at Nextel is to surround yourself with fantastic people. And I happened to work with some amazing entrepreneurs who I just learned so much from. And obviously, it's great to be on the ground floor of an exciting industry like wireless. And it was just an incredible experience. Very hard work, very rewarding, lots of ups and downs, but learned so much.
And Governor, so obviously going from a place like Nextel to politics, what was it that made you want to go from the private sector to the public sector?
I actually had an experience when I was 17 years old. As mentioned, I grew up in Newark, spent 95% of my childhood within a 3-mile radius of Newark High School. My entertainment most weekends was driving up Main Street and driving back on Delaware Avenue. But when I was 17, my dad took a sabbatical from the University of Delaware, and we traveled a lot, and including a few days in India. And I was so overwhelmed by the poverty that I experienced, that I saw there, that it was really the first time in my life that I said to myself, like, why am I here? Like, why am I here in this sort of big cosmic sense? And I just, that was the moment in time when I decided I wanted to be involved in public service. And it took me sort of on a convoluted career journey before I got there, but it was literally that moment in India. It was 2:00 in the morning. We had just gone on a tour to see the Taj Mahal, got off the bus, and as we got off the bus, we were surrounded by dozens of little kids who were awake at 2:00 in the morning to try to ask for money. And I thought, boy, I mean, what a different world. And I never thought that there could be homeless people in the United States.
Yeah.
And it wasn't too much longer that the homeless problem in our country really took off. And so that was why I decided I wanted to do public service way back when I was 17.
When you were in the private sector and Nextel was growing rapidly, were there certain takeaways that you had that when you entered your first day in the office as governor that you felt were particularly suitable for you to take charge and become the chief executive of a state?
Yeah, I mean, it became clear to me pretty early, even in college, that if I wanted to change things, I had to speak the language of business, because it was clear to me that the people who control the money call a lot of the shots in life. So instead of going immediately into public service out of college, I decided to go into business, because I knew that if people are working in decent jobs, that will tend to resolve every other public policy challenge we face, more or less. Yeah. And so I learned so much in business, and I wanted to bring that into the public sector and really try to focus on building a strong economy where people could work and achieve their potential, because that would tend to, if people are working, could put food on the table, a roof over their heads, and help their kids achieve all that they want to achieve, then that's the best way of building a community.
And the governor, he mentions college. He went to Brown University, clearly didn't get into my alma mater, Cornell. He was maybe waitlisted or at best. But he took office in 2009. And for those of you who remember 2009, that was at the height of the world financial crisis. We had most banks in the world under incredible stress. The large banks like Bear Stearns and Lehman Brothers were imploding. Every weekend there was a European or a South American bank that would go out of business. So a time of great stress. So Governor, in 2009, when you start your first term, you step into a $800 million deficit. Not at all what you had thought when you had early on planned for the run. How did you, take office your first day and think like, okay, how am I going to get out of here? I don't want to be the governor that, day one raises taxes on everyone, especially, when we're in the Great Recession, the worst financial place we'd been in since the Great Depression. So,
Well, it is true that when I decided to run for office, the economy was fine. By the time I won, the economy was just an unbelievable mess. And it was only 6 months that I was asking for a recount, so maybe I didn't get it after all. But look, I mean, it was a disaster, and it was a disaster for families across the state. I will never forget the families that I met, the fathers that I met. I met this one guy who's 40 years old, wife 40 years old, 2 kids. They were twins. They were 10 years old. And he told me he had just lost his job. And he said the hardest conversation he had ever had in his life was having to go home and tell his kids that he had lost his job. And this, multiply that by hundreds and hundreds of thousands of people just in Delaware alone. So we really did not know how we were going to approach this over the first couple months. So I went literally all over the state of Delaware. I did more than 60 town hall meetings. This was really to buy us time to figure out how we were going to solve this massive budget shortfall. Right. And what I said to people, I said, I'm going to come back with an approach. I don't know exactly what it's going to be yet, but I can tell you here are our guiding principles. First of all, we are going to do our best to protect the most vulnerable amongst us. Secondly, we are going to try to not impact the things that can lead to long-term prosperity, like education and economic development. And finally, there's going to be shared sacrifice, and that means you. So everybody agreed, everybody nodded their head when I announced that those were my guiding principles. But then when I actually announced the budget, which included big budget cuts and it included tax increases, nobody was nodding their head anymore because they thought that shared sacrifice was about somebody else and not about them.
Well, I think one of the reasons we became immediately such quick fans of yours, and we didn't know you that well while you were running for governor until you became governor. But this is a tough time in the real estate world for us as well. So I think everyone is feeling their pain. And I remember we might have been feeling bad for ourselves, but we'd come out of meetings with you and we would say, wow, what a tough time to be governor. Yeah. And we really felt bad for what you had to do. But what I loved about that time was you didn't care who was a Republican, a Democrat, who you were. You just brought everyone together to collectively try to find that. And I am glad that you started in the private sector, because I think you might have had this vision as governor, and what you quickly learned was you had to sort of put parts of that vision aside and deal with the issues at hand. So can you sort of tell us about, were you sort of in this moment of like, be careful what you wish for, or tell us a little bit about those early days?
Those early days were definitely be careful what you wish for. But it's true, I had to spend, I'd say the first 2 years of my time as governor digging out, but I really do feel like the last 6 years or so, I was able to focus on, moving the state forward. And so much of it was about jobs and workforce development. I would go all over the state. I'd ask business people. I probably did 2,500 business visits during my time as governor. Everybody from, I'd go to New York and meet with Jamie Dimon, the chairman of JP Morgan Chase, or small, literally Craig at FAT, the barbershop here, just off Market Street. I mean, everybody in between. And I asked him, what is it that, how can the state, how can government be helpful to you. And so what we did is we listened really, really carefully, and so much of what they had to say, everybody thinks it's about taxes. Taxes are important, but what they really want is people want talent. They want to build their companies, they want to build their businesses around the ability to recruit qualified and talented people. So we ended up spending a huge amount of our time focused exactly on that.
The in terms of, you had were really affected by the man who lost their job. I remember walking in the office, and a woman who I work with, a colleague in our accounting department, was very concerned about our company, rightly so. Obviously, being in the real estate business, many of our counterparties, going out of business. It was a terrifying time for us for 2 years. And she said to me, Rob, if I lose my job, it's likely in this economy she would not be able to get a new job. I'll lose my home.
Yeah.
And I think about that, a few times a week, just because of the great responsibility that we have as leaders of our company to make sure that we work as hard as possible to provide the best opportunities for our colleagues. And I was working hard then, but I think we went on a tear, after that, rarely taking the day off during the weekends, rarely going to bed before 11 or 12 at night, just to really grind it out. And, like you say a crisis is a terrible thing to waste. We emerged from the 2008 financial crisis very strong. And I think you can talk more about it, but the state really emerged with the greatest growth of employment, I think, among the history of the state. And there's so many great companies that ended up growing here. We're in the Chemours headquarters building, which you changed the law to have this company become a Fortune 500 company here, just up the street in sight. The pharmaceutical company, the same. So maybe you can touch on all the great things that came out of the financial crisis.
I have learned that when you tap into the spirit of the people of this state, amazing things can happen. And that's very much true. In this building alone. I remember when DuPont moved up to 141 to Chestnut Run, and Chemours could have gone anywhere.
Yeah.
And I remember coming to see the CEO of Chemours, Mark Vergnano, and he, to his credit, he was very clear to me. He said, if you do this and this, we'll stay, and if you don't, we won't. That was incredibly helpful. And people don't know, I am sure, how much time and effort you guys put into figuring out how to finance the renovation of this building, what it would mean for the hotel, what it would mean for the apartments. And if you had not figured that out, we are sitting in the most iconic building in Wilmington, here at the DuPont building. It would have been empty for 20, 30, 40 years. And I don't, that's not hyperbole. No. That's the way it would have been. And now we're here, and it's just remarkable. And you multiply that, because you guys were great entrepreneurs, and multiply that by all the wonderful entrepreneurs in the state. I'm not going to start naming them. Yeah. But it's not just about, we love our big companies, but we love our small companies, our entrepreneurs, the energy, and and government needs to be an effective partner. Yeah. And that's really what it's all about. And I think we've had a series of governors in Delaware who have had that approach. Governor Carney does now as well. And I think that's really what it's all about, is how do you partner with the private sector? Because government's not going to create the jobs, but what government can do is create the kind of environment where entrepreneurs and businesses want to build.
As you said, with the Chemours leadership team, they're aspirational for any entrepreneur, because they run a great company that performs well, but they're able to do it in a compassionate way. They're very just genuinely good people. And I think that, as you said, goes throughout the ecosystem with the other entrepreneurs here in the state. And then in terms of a crisis is a terrible thing to waste. Had DuPont not left the downtown, obviously they built two beautiful headquarters buildings that are only a few miles away, but left a big hole in the city. And had that not had happened, they would probably still be here. The building would still be underutilized. So in hindsight, it was great for the city that they were able to transferred the building to Chemours, who sold it to us, who we built this great residential project, upgraded the hotel, renovated the restaurants, opened a food hall, and built this spectacular building.
I mean, just to frame it, in your 8 years, you did so many incredible things, and we were really there to cheer you along. But we love being here in the Chemours building because this was a building. It's the largest building in the state of Delaware. It's also it's a 100-year-old building as well, but it's at the epicenter of our city. And when Chemours had left, had the leadership of Chemours not had the courage to stay here, and if they had not had the support of our government to really work with them to stay here, this would have been just potentially a white elephant on our community that could have taken decades to bring back. What I loved about Chemours was, and Governor, you addressed this earlier, is so much of what companies are looking for today, it's a race to attract talent, and they knew that they could turn this into a special headquarters. It was sort of what people post-COVID are looking to do, and they saw this pre-COVID. And the other thing they used to say, we're a 200-year-old startup here at Chemours. So I love the fact they want to really marry the old with the new and this beautiful new headquarters that we're in.
And then I'm really proud for those BPG colleagues about how they really understand what it takes to attract talent to the area. So it's not just about building great office space for a company like a Marlette, but it's also about building the things that are important to people socially. Today we opened up Wilma's, the new restaurant and duck pin bowling lanes, Maker's Alley, obviously the Queen, Deco, the food hall. Like those are so important. One, because they're fun to go to, but that draws talent.
The restaurants.
The restaurants. Yeah, the restaurants.
And how many people have moved into Wilmington in like the last?
We have almost 4,000 people.
I remember 10 years ago.
In our project.
10 years ago, we talked about we should aspire to 5,000 people moving in like over the next 10 years.
And we'll do that in 6 years.
It's amazing.
Yeah, it's amazing.
And so what a huge difference that makes. So
it's a transformation. All right, so before we go into your current day job, wanted to ask you, because I think this segment's a little bit about leadership in crisis, but you as a leader, you go and you're governor, and you realize you've got these other headwinds. What was your biggest challenge that you faced, or maybe it didn't expect to face, but what was that big first challenge, first term of your governorship?
Well, I think walking in and facing an $850 million shortfall in the context of a budget that was just a little bit bigger than $3 billion. I mean, that was really very significant.
You're not just trying to reduce cost to fix that. That is a macro global change.
It was a macro global issue. But what I found, and this has been my experience in everything I've ever done, is that if you surround yourself with really great people, you can figure it out. And that's what we did. And we had an amazing staff in the governor's office with great leadership there, chief of staff and the whole team, and then a great cabinet. And then thank God this was Delaware. I don't think I'd really actually want to be governor of any other state, because this is a place where you can work together, and everybody is willing to listen to everybody else. And literally, in my conference room as governor, maybe there are 15 places at the table. If you fill that table up with the right 15 people, you can solve virtually anything you need to solve. And so that was really important, and recognizing all of the fantastic people in communities across the state. If you tap into them, if you are not so arrogant as to think that you have a monopoly on good ideas, it's amazing what you can accomplish. So
it seems then too, in 2009, there was more civility in politics and government. Obviously, in Delaware, we don't have the same divisiveness. We do have some here, but looking back versus today, where you see kind of nationally how people can be so mean to each other in politics. I mean, was it helpful? Were both sides of the aisle collectively working with you, or as soon as you said, I'm going to raise taxes, people are like, I don't care, go figure out something else.
It was not perfect, and frankly, I had as many problems with my own party as I did with the other party. That's the kind of thing that I'm allowed to say now that I'm no longer
right.
And there will be plenty of.
But you're smiling about it.
I am smiling. And you know what? Everybody comes at it with a different perspective. You're not supposed to agree, but so long as you can have a laugh after the argument, that's what it's all about.
So we've talked a lot about challenge, but you've left this incredible legacy in your 8 years as governorship. What are you most proud of? What's the most pride in your legacy?
I think, frankly, coming out of the big recession with the strongest job growth in the region, one of the strongest in the country, was really significant. And then, there are so many things. I think our bilingual education program, we now have 1 in every 6 kindergartners starting in bilingual education in the state. So by the time they start as kindergartners, they spend half of every school day learning in either Spanish or Chinese. It's not that they're taking Spanish or Chinese class, they're literally studying science, social studies, and math in the target language. So by the time they're in 9th grade, they'll be fluent. So that's a big one. The focus that we put, we knew we had to do a lot more on college access for kids who previously would never have thought about college, and we did. But we also did probably the best work in the country related to kids who don't want to go to college and who want to finish high school with certifications and credentials that make them ready for a job. And we started with 27 kids at one high school in advanced manufacturing. This was about 8 years ago. Now there are 20,000 kids in Delaware, high school students, who spend hundreds of hours while they're still in high school taking classes like at Delaware Tech or the University of Delaware or Delaware State. They graduate high school with a high school diploma, with college credits under their belt, and with a nationally recognized certificate that proves that they can do the job in everything from culinary to bioscience to computer programming, advanced manufacturing, and 15 other fields. So those are a couple.
When you left, it seemed to me, and you probably have a better perspective just as you're traveling with the White House right now, that you left and the infrastructure of the state was in fairly good shape compared to its peer states. Would you agree with that? Like when you drive around the state, especially now, with all the additional infrastructure that's happened over the last few years, do you feel like you left, or there's just still massive gaps? I'm more ignorant to the.
I think there's always more to do, but there was a big focus. I think back to the theme of businesses want to hire talent. Well, talented people want to work in places where they want to live. Yeah. So investing in things like quality of life was really important. That's one of the reasons, we spend so much time on the downtown development districts. So that our urban core, not only Wilmington, but Laurel and Smyrna and all over the state, would be attractive, that people would want to live there. That's why we focused on things like walking paths and bike trails.
The Markell Bike Trail.
Which is spectacular.
Today, if you haven't gone on, you have to go.
Today at the restaurant grand opening, I commented today the legacy of your downtown development district. So today, in the middle of COVID, we have 2 hotels that are under construction, high-end hotels. We have 3 more restaurants that are slated to be delivered early next year, and 4 apartment buildings. And all of those would not have happened without the downtown development district. And what's amazing is how they've created critical mass. So they're all in the area, so they're not kind of randomly, far apart from each other. The fact that they're all close together creates that energy during the day, the quality of life at night so I think that is something that, we thank you for, every day. And also it allows, the restaurants, if you go into them now in the DDDs, the downtown development districts, the quality of design is so exceptional now, which allows them to be successful even through a downturn like COVID. And you can do that because of the capital that is helped provided by.
We love to travel around the country to go to small cities. Our tagline is we want Wilmington to be the best small city in America. And we used to aspire to be sort of like a Portland or a Nashville or even parts of Baltimore, Philly. And I think today, where we are, thanks to a lot of the infrastructure you put into place, it's a pretty cool place to live. Oh, by the way, you've got the beach and Kent and Sussex and all these amazing things there. So we've come a long way.
You have, thanks to your great.
Well, no, the whole state. But all right. So moving to the White House, when you left, I felt like you're ready for time away from public office. And now we find you going from the governor's mansion to the White House.
Right.
That's where you check in every day. So tell us a little bit about what you're up to.
Well, I got a call a few months ago from the Deputy Chief of Staff at the White House, and she said, "Is this Governor Markell?" I said, "Yes." And she said, "This is Jen O'Malley Dillon." And she said, "I know this call is coming out of left field, but the president wants to know if you'd be willing to serve as the White House coordinator for the resettlement of our allies from Afghanistan." And so I went in the course of about 36 hours from "you've got to be kidding me" to saying I'd be honored to do it. And it has been such an incredible experience. So far, about 76,000 of our allies from Afghanistan have arrived in the United States. We've resettled over half of them. The others are still on 7 different military bases across the country. But I have been now all over the country. I've been to Oklahoma and Texas and Michigan and New York and Virginia. And I have learned so much about the generosity of the American people. And when you get past the politics, blue and red doesn't mean much of anything. I mean, Oklahoma, pretty red state.
Yeah.
They are doing an incredible job. The Catholic Charities Resettlement Agency there is phenomenal. And I met 2 people, 2 quick stories, people I met there. One was I met a mom, dad, 5 kids, 6 on the way. And they told me all about their journey, their life in Afghanistan, their time here. They're in Oklahoma City. And we said, "What has been your biggest surprise?" And the father said, "We envisioned that life in America would be too good to be true. Life in America is too good to be true."
Wow.
I mean, incredible. And then a mother, 26-year-old mother
Wow.
in Tulsa. She's here with her 6-year-old daughter. Same question. She spent 2 months when she arrived at Fort Bliss in Texas. Said, "What's been your biggest surprise?" She said, "I was so overwhelmed by the soldiers at Fort Bliss and the service that they're providing. I realized that's the kind of service that I want to provide too." And so you meet these people and you see they are so grateful. They feel so fortunate to be here. And we should be so grateful to all the Americans who are stepping up and welcoming our allies from Afghanistan.
At the time of your appointment, it was, I think, literally the most high-profile job in America, right? There is this massive...
a lot of downside.
A lot of downside. And with, just a huge amount of people that were so helpful to America that you had to get, homes for. And it seems to me that it went as good as anyone could have hoped. I mean, how big was your staff that helped you execute on this?
So it's still in process.
Yeah.
I have a team of about 6, but the real work is done within the federal government. The Department of Homeland Security is the lead agency, the Department of State, Department of Health and Human Services, and the Pentagon. The military is incredible. And I've now made 2 visits to Fort Dix. I was down at Quantico. What the military is able to build in such a short period of time. Just today I was at Fort Dix, and to see these soldiers coloring with the little kids, playing soccer with the kids, truly remarkable. And so we still have a lot to do, but it's really been
I can't imagine what it's like on day one. You go to the White House and they're like, "Okay, you got to go find a home for 75,000 Afghani refugees." I can't even think of that. Can't imagine that first day. But what did being governor of the state of Delaware do to help prepare for that moment?
Well, I think being governor means you bring people together and you ask a lot of questions, and then you hopefully pay a lot of attention to the answers.
Yeah.
And you work with people. And so we have so much capacity in this country. What the president said is, he said, "I want you to lead not just a whole of U.S. government approach, I want you to lead a whole of America approach." Yeah. And thank God we have so much generosity in this country. We have the resettlement agencies, but we have so many. In Tulsa, when Catholic Charities was receiving a whole bunch of donations from people, they had to open up a warehouse. They posted that they need volunteers to work at the warehouse, and within a couple days, they had 1,000 people sign up.
Wow.
I mean, it is remarkable. And so multiply this across the country. And when I have met these Afghans, just the other day, this week, I was in Albany, and I met a guy. He was a pilot with the Afghan Air Force. He had been to the U.S. before to train. He had been to Texas. That was where he wanted to resettle. But he's in Albany. And he said, "You know what? Now I want to stay in Albany." And then he named individuals. Julie and Mary have been so welcoming. And that's what it's all about. You can't talk about this kind of effort at 30,000 feet about policy. This is about one American at a time, welcoming our allies. And thank God for our veterans, who have been the most outspoken and the most powerful voices about our obligation to the people who fought by our side in Afghanistan.
Well, I know I've got one last question for you. I know you've had an incredible career, a proud Delawarean, but you've got one person who's probably your biggest cheerleader and your toughest critic, and that's your mom. And Rob and I, I think we share something. We were raised by mothers who made us feel like we could conquer the world and actually do these amazing things. What would your mom say is the most impressive thing you've accomplished to date?
Being her third favorite kid, probably, something like that. No, I've been very fortunate with my mom and dad, certainly with Carla, who I've known since kindergarten.
Yeah.
And we grew up together, and my kids.
Carla, were you high school sweethearts, or
We were
was
not.
that...
She had a football player boyfriend who went to Christiana, so I couldn't compete with him. I actually went to middle school with him. I couldn't compete with him, and I had to wait another 10 years. It was at our 10-year high school reunion that we finally.
Literally at the reunion.
Yeah.
That's cool.
Yeah. So, but I do have to correct one thing. I wouldn't have brought it up, but you did. You said I probably didn't get into Cornell. The truth is, I got into Cornell, but I didn't get into Princeton. So
I'm sure you got into Cornell.
but I didn't get into Princeton.
We're the state, we're SUNY Ithaca. There was a young, I think it was a senior in college, I think goes to Penn, did an analysis of compared all the Ivy League schools to fast food restaurants, and Princeton was Starbucks, and it was going on, all these, Harvard, because everyone knows Harvard is McDonald's, and not quite McDonald's, but still well known, was Burger King. And they said Cornell was the Denny's of the Ivy League, which I thought was, really, really amazing. But I think it, obviously it goes back to what you spent so much time on. Education is so important, and I think that's probably what our collective parents would be so proud of is, how we, did, educationally, regardless of where you go to college, that we got the most out of it. And I just want to thank you. Part of this show is about hometown pride, and you've created so much hometown pride this year at the White House for all of us. It's been really inspirational, and we thank you so much for all the service to this community.
Thank you, and I can't thank you guys enough. I mean, I really, it would be hard to imagine what Wilmington would be without BPG over these last 20 years, and your persistence and vision, even at some really difficult times, you kept plowing through, and just being on Market Street when it's packed these days is just really exciting. I just want to thank you guys for all that you've done.
Thank you so much for joining us today, Governor Markell. We really appreciate everything you've done.
Thank you. And follow us on social media at Buccini Poland and subscribe to our channel. We'll see you next time on Field Notes with Rob and Chris.